Hi everybody, this is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. I've had people ask me how to make a vegetable broth, and so that's what we're going to do today. Now you want to start by getting the biggest pot that you own, okay? And now I have a recipe below. This is very, very loose, okay? You don't need to follow it exactly because what we're after here is flavored water, flavored broth from the vegetables that will be used in the future to flavor other foods. So we're not making a finished soup here, so bear that in mind. So everything can be adjusted in a tremendous amount of ways. Now what I have here is one very large onion that I've just loosely chopped up, coarsely chopped up. And you could use a medium onion, whatever size pot you've got. Your goal is to really stuff that pot with vegetables as much as you can. Okay, so one large onion there. I've got roughly 4 stalks of celery here. Again, you can vary this amount any way you need to. 4 average size carrots here that I've cut up, and you know, some people will leave the pieces very large. I find that if you cut them smaller, you're going to get a lot more essence out of these vegetables. So I've got my pieces relatively small. And let me back up a little bit to the onion. My premise is, for me personally, if I'm willing to eat it, it's going to go in my broth. Some people will put a whole onion in there with the skin and everything, the outer dry skins. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But for me personally, I have this premise: if I'm willing to eat it, it can go in the pot. I don't eat dry onion skins, so they go in the trash, or if I had a compost heap, they would go in there, but they don't go in my stock pot. The choice is yours on which way to go. Now we want some greens. My recipe calls for 4 to 6 cups or so of greens, whatever you're going to want to put in your pot. Now this is cabbage, and you see the 2-cup mark is around here. It's a heaping 2 cups of cabbage, and actually when I cut a piece of cabbage off of the head to cut up for this, I actually had more left over, so it's going in here too. So you see these measurements are very rough. It really is not a big deal. And then I have some kale, and again, 2-cup mark is about up to here. This is heaping, and they're crammed in there, no issue. I like to have greens in my vegetable stock. Usually when I make it, I use the pulp from when I juice fresh vegetables, and it's going to be mostly kale and carrots. So this time I've got some cabbage in there, and that's good. And with the onion, I've got a fresh onion here. A lot of times I'll use dried minced onions, 2 or 3 heaping tablespoons of that in place of it, just to make it easier. So, you know, you can vary this up in a zillion ways. And then I have some parsley, 2 heaping tablespoons of parsley, about 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, and roughly 4 bay leaves. I actually have an extra one in here because a couple of these are not very big. And then an important ingredient that I don't like to omit is a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. This helps to give your vegetable broth a really good depth of flavor that it just will not have otherwise, no matter what you do. So I found that adding this tomato paste is a vital ingredient for me for the broth that I make, and that is that. And then let me get the rest of this in here. Now you have your choice on whether to add salt and pepper to this. You don't have to, because again, you're going to be using this flavored water to season other foods with, and you can add salt and pepper later if you want. I like to add some at this point. Now that looks like a lot, that's a tablespoon, but in this case it's really not that much, because we're going to fill this pot with water. And then I'm going to just throw in some black pepper, and now we're going to fill this pot with water. All right, my pot is full. You can see I've got it up to about here on the water. I'm going to turn the stove onto high, bring this to a boil, and then I'm going to lower the heat so it will just simmer, and I'll keep it covered along the way. And we want it to simmer for at least 1 hour. I prefer to go more like 2 hours and really let these vegetables cook down. Now, there are some optional things that you can do with this. Some people will add garlic to it, nutritional yeast, mushrooms. Mushrooms would add an umami flavor to it. It might be good if that's what you want. If you've had corn on the cob, you could save those cobs in the freezer and throw them in here as well. I do not personally add garlic to it. You could do that, but I know that not everything I'm going to use this vegetable broth with will call for garlic. So I really don't, personally, I don't want the garlic flavor in here, and I feel like if I need the garlic later, I'll just add it. But I don't want it in necessarily everything that I use this in, so I leave the garlic out. Some people will add nutritional yeast to this. Again, that's something I prefer not to put in there, but I've got optional ingredients listed in the recipe below, and what you add to it is certainly your choice. So I'm going to bring this to a boil with the lid on, lower it to a simmer, let it cook for a good 2 hours, and then we'll go from there. Our vegetable broth has simmered for a good 2 hours. I'm turning the stove off. You can see everything looks really good and the vegetables are cooked down. And so I'm going to allow it to cool off some, and then I'm going to strain it over a bowl in a colander and divvy the broth out into containers that will go into the freezer that are in whole cup measurements. The containers I use are usually about a 4-cup container, but that makes it a lot easier when you go to use it later on. So I'll show you what we come up with when all that is done. All right, we have our finished product here. I put a colander in this large bowl, and then I emptied the soup pot into the colander. It took several times here, and allowed the broth to flow through, and then I put it in these containers, and so I have almost 5. This one's not quite full. 4-cup containers out of this, and by the time these finish draining, I might come close to filling that. So I'll say I've got about 20 cups of vegetable broth out of this, which is really a good deal on this, and really, really good. Then the question remains, what do you do with your vegetables that you have here? It's really your choice. For me, I'm going to eat them. I'll just pick out the bay leaves and I will eat them. And there's a lot there. I may reserve some in the freezer for when I'm making some other kind of a dish that calls for vegetables. I could add them to a soup along the way, or I could just season them up a little bit and eat them just like they are. You could also squeeze them either through a colander or through a nut milk bag and get more broth out of them, and then if you do that, they're pretty well spent. You could eat the pulp if you want, or you could put it in a compost bin, something like that. But to me, they're fine, just like they are, so that's what my intention is just to eat them. I do hope this helps you out. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. This is Judi at Judi in the Kitchen. Bye for now.